Remember when everybody was talking about how terrible the Qatar World Cup was? 2022's World Cup in Qatar was disgraceful. The slave labor that was involved in it. How much, you heard Europeans, German soccer players talking about how terrible it was that Qatar was selected. And now those same Europeans are suddenly mums. They've got nothing to say about the disgraceful handling of the World Cup in the United States, or they simply don't have the same energy for it. People were talking about boycotts of the Qatar World Cup. But even though those criticisms were very valid because it was disgraceful, there was evil that went into that. Ultimately, every World Cup goes through this, right? The World Cup, which is, I fault no colonized people, no working class people for watching the World Cup. It is a tradition. It is something that people do. It brings people together. Being in New York City when the World Cup is happening is like unbelievable sensation. But the idea that we can judge different World Cups in terms of morality is kind of laughable. By this point, we should all be well acquainted with the fact that the World Cup is just evil. It's evil. It is a tool of imperialism. It is a tool of European countries, and the United States coordinating to maintain a European NATO business, a cultural imperial business that involves the forcible destruction of neighborhoods, the employment of slave labor, the terrible working conditions for workers across different sectors. It requires significant, ecological problems. It requires this no matter where the World Cup is situated. And in that way, it's not really a World Cup at all. It is an organized media creation by a group of business people, primarily white business people from Europe and the United States, to take advantage of poor athletes around the world striving to become international soccer players, footballers, striving to make significant salaries. It takes advantage of people's passion and love for sports and the solidarity and community that it can foster to create massive profit, to maintain the wheels of capitalism. I mean, it's just an evil thing, right? World Cup has as much equity as the World Bank says Skate and Destroy. So in 2026, surprise, surprise, we have issues of stadium and hotel workers that are threatening strikes because of their low wages, as well as the deployment of ICE crackdowns, and visa issues have defined this World Cup so far, particularly as it's taken place in the United States. You've had a referee from Somalia who was unable to make the World Cup despite being assigned for it because he wasn't allowed entry because he had the same name as a terrorist. Excuse me. John Oliver does have great videos about FIFA. But in 2010, remember Sami Namina AA, Waka Waka AA? Sami Namina Sangalewa? Nationwide strike at South African World Cup building sites. This was submitted in 2009 for libcom.org. 70,000 construction workers in South Africa have gone on strike, halting work on stadiums being built for the 2010 World Cup. Unions are threatening to continue the strike as long as necessary if their demands for a 13% wage increase are not met. In Brazil, in 2013 and 2014, the building of these stadiums for the Brazilian World Cup was notorious. It was notorious for employing essentially slave labor. Again, okay? Brazil World Cup workers face slave-like conditions. This is from the BBC. An investigation into the expansion of Sao Paulo International Airport found that 111 workers were living in poor accommodation near the building site. Their promised wages were $625 a month. Some of them had to pay more than $220 to secure a job. International contractors that come in and take it and exploit the living shit out of poor workers. That is what the World Cup has always been. 2018 was in Russia. I don't even need to tell you about Russia. 2020, the migrant worker crisis in Qatar was highlighted. Every single World Cup, there's a conversation about the unethical nature of FIFA and the unethical nature of these spectacles, which are designed around building massive stadiums that don't benefit local communities, that promise boosts to economy that are ultimately very feeble, and that are designed to create a capitalist spectacle of this sport while still trafficking in its necessity as a social unifier. It would be like if we took there's no really examples that I can give that don't already exist, but it's the same way that we take African tribal rhythms and turn them into easily commodifiable music around the world, the ways that Black American music is turned into this easily commodifiable product around the world. All of that is taking these real essential elements of how we live, how we interact with each other, which is through creating entertainment, through creating art, through creating spectacle, through gathering together for events like these, and turning them into things that you can't afford to get into unless you're rich, that only service the rich in an area. All for what, right? It's not like these things make these communities safer. It's not like these things, again, have a sustainable boost to any of these industries. So it's a psyop. Right? There's a psyop that always takes place when it comes to the World Cup. And I don't begrudge anybody for watching it. Look, when Cape Verde draws with Spain in an incredible duel, an incredible showmanship of defensive work and putting your body on the line against a rich and talented team and has been colonized and impoverished for centuries. Of course that's going to move you. It's only human for that to move you. It's only human for you to look at that and say, well, that's nice that people get to have that. And then also the goalkeeper, who has the man of the match performance, who does an incredible job keeping the game scoreless, then talks after the game about how his mom couldn't come because she couldn't get a visa, right? I'll show you that story. Like, yeah, Cabo Verde's Volzinha says US visa issues stopped mom witnessing World Cup heroics. This is what life is like, okay? Sometimes we want to take these drastic stands to demonstrate to other people that we are not participating in the system. We're not slaving to the system the same way that they are. We're so much more moral and ethical than they are. But in reality, life is just always a counterbalance of the contradictions of building and destroying. Because of imperialism, colonialism, and capitalism, you can't escape those things. Because of patriarchy, because of homophobia, you can't escape these things. There are cultural issues that come up through sports, right? There will be Trump supporters who are playing for Team USA. There will be Trump supporters that play for every sports team in America. There will be, homophobia incidents. There will be, issues where a brilliant athlete gets all the passes in the world and makes all the money in the world despite having active sexual assault cases against him, like the captain for Ghana. And we might want to live in a world where we can just say, I'm better than this, I won't participate. And some of us just genuinely don't have an interest, so that's fine. But what would really be more productive is asking ourselves, how can we recognize and fight against the evil in the places where we're supposed to have solidarity, in the places that are supposed to be for us? How can we reclaim these things for us? And that takes building different dual structures of power. That takes mutual aid work. It takes fighting, right? In a very literal sense of the word, fighting against these companies, against these elites. That work is never over. And the most important thing is not shutting our brains off. You cannot shut your brain off. You cannot propose to yourself, well, this thing that I do, I know that it's bad, but I just don't think about that because I get so much enjoyment from it. You have to be able to hold both. Even if it's not exactly at the same time, even if you're juggling, you have to be able to hold both. You have to use that excitement and that engagement and alchemize it into your work for other people. Alchemize it into decolonization and anti-capitalism. Like, for instance, in New York, the New York Knicks won the NBA championship, first time in 53 years. I was very happy. I was very excited about it, texting all my friends, People are partying, people are raging in the streets. Very exciting, very seminal moment. But if it just stays there and it doesn't become a place of inciting new action for a better future, like if people can't take that energy that they have in the streets for celebrating the New York Knicks and bring it towards Delaney Hall, or bring it towards pro-Palestine organizations in New York, or bring it towards the workers in New York, like the 24-hour care workers in New York that are being systematically enslaved by the law, or, incarcerated peoples, or ICE. If you can't bring that energy there, it will have been wasted, because the excitement that you're feeling, the love that you're feeling, that's humanity. And it is fundamentally irrational and contradictory to be in love with something because of its humanity, and also to then destroy that humanity in yourself by not extending empathy. That's why, you have these people that, like, they can have it all in a situation where they can have so much success in the sporting realm, and then at the same time, they end up being kind of soulless and evil people. Like, this is just how it goes, right? And this is why we're also seeing things like conversations about the hydration breaks during the World Cup. The hydration breaks being a representation of just how much extraction takes place. Somebody like Jurgen Klopp, former manager of Liverpool, talking about how it's just clearly a ploy by rich people to insert more ads into a game, and it doesn't serve the game at all, right? Making the viewing experience worse, sure, but in actuality, being a perfect embodiment and representation of who the real enemy is. Not the person you're playing against on the field, but who created that field itself. Yeah, there were Palestinian flags at the Arsenal parade, Lamine Yamal with the Palestine flag after Barcelona won. Like, there are ways in which these things are crossing over a little bit. It's not nearly enough, but it shows that that energy is there, that that can be there. But if you don't acknowledge it and push towards that and push for these two spaces to be connected, for politics and sports to be connected, this hydration break shit and this sports betting and the sports washing of the Saudi regime, all that stuff is just going to get worse and worse. I think the perfect embodiment of this, and what's so fascinating about the World Cup above all other sporting events, is the case of Haiti. I've talked about Haiti before on my channel. I'll talk about Haiti again on my channel over and over again. As a Dominican, what the world has done, not just Dominicans, but what the world has done against Haiti, is a perfect summation of how colonialism never ended. It is a perfect embodiment of how the world will never forgive Haiti for being the only nation in the modern world, so to speak, born from a slave revolt of Black people against colonizing Europeans. And so when Haiti makes it to the World Cup in a miraculous showing, right? The World Cup expands the amount of teams. Teams like Cape Verde and Haiti get a chance to get in, and then they play well enough to get in, and it's an amazing moment. And then they get in, and then they have a jersey that has a simple depiction, beautiful depiction of the final battle of the Haitian War of Independence. It doesn't say "fuck white people" on the shirt. Okay, this is tasteful, so to speak. Although, if it said "fuck white people," I'd be into that. It's just the depiction of Independence Day, essentially. Every nation gets to have this. Every nation gets to have this. The U.S. gets to fly flags that has red, white, and blue, with the red stripes representing the blood of the soldiers who died for the country, right? We get to celebrate July 4th every day, and everybody gets to incorporate that, But Haiti can put a tasteful, even tasteful shade, as Rolando puts it. You can call this tasteful shade about the Haitian War of Independence on their jerseys, and it's banned. It's forced to change the design. Not Haiti's not banned, and the shirt is banned. Haiti is forced to change the design of the jersey because it was deemed too political. This is written by actually Julia Gaffield, who wrote a book. I would get it, but right now that room is occupied. A book called "I Have Avenged America" about Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Jean-Jacques Dessalines has been painted for years, and still on the internet you will see this, painted for years as a white genocide heir because of a reactionary French narrative that Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was essentially the liberator of Haiti and the first emperor of Haiti. Mind you, I'm not arguing this is a perfect man at all. This is a man with many flaws. His inability to escape, to push Haiti out of the slavery-based agricultural system. We can get into it. But this is a man, an independence forefather of Haiti. But the European world has for years painted him as somebody who committed genocide against white people. And only recently, through work by people like Julia Gaffield, has the counter narrative finally become more popular. There's still a lot of work to go. That no, it wasn't a genocide against white people. It was the finalization of a war against the colonizer, against an empire that was continuing to occupy the country. Of course, in that, there is a lot of tragedy. Of course, in that, there is, as Fanon writes about, this fundamental destruction of the soul that has to take place, and all this darkness that has to take place. Of course, there are regrettable things. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying incidences where violence was taken too far, so to speak, whatever. But the idea that violence is not the answer, but the United States is cool, and France is cool, and Germany is cool. We could all just sing our songs about independence, and we could all sing our songs about our pride in our nation, when those nations are fundamentally built in violence. And the one nation whose violence enacted upon them, slavery enacted upon them, they can't talk about it. And if they do something as simple as celebrating their independence the way everybody else does, it gets deemed too political, or it gets deemed to be racist against white people. That's a perfect embodiment of how the World Cup and other world institutions are not for the world at all. They're Western, European, United States, Canadian institutions, Australian institutions, right? Australia in the sense of, the European settler colonial project of Australia, right? These are institutions that are meant to, through co-optation, through capitalist development, siphon the energy of the world away from its own independence, away from its own decolonization, away from its liberation. Okay, so we'll do a whole video about Haiti another time, sometime soon. But this is, I think, a perfect exemplification of how the World Cup works. FIFA simply has to have this event meet certain criteria. It cannot be an event that emboldens workers or empowers workers at all, despite being labeled as something that will boost the local economy. It cannot be an event that is investing into the communities that actually live in the places where these events take place, that actually live around these stadiums. It cannot benefit these people. It cannot shed light on their struggle. And when the world participates in it, they have to participate as these neutral, really neutralized. That's a bar. Don't make me get up again. I'm gonna get up again. Sorry, I'm gonna sit down. But they want it all to be politically neutral. Then they want these nations to come in. Oh, they're all these different nations just fighting on this turf, as if there's equal development for any of these nations, as if most of these nations aren't built in settler colonialism or other forms of colonialism, as if all of this isn't just different constructs around, creating a categorized world that the West can dominate. A lot of you are going to be like, you're talking over my head, you're getting too abstract, you're using too much woke language. But you know that this is true. You know that this is true. Something like Eurovision, same thing. Why is Israel participating in Eurovision? Israel's not in Europe. You know why. These are colonial empowerment projects. These are imperial empowerment projects. So of course they're going to have all these issues. Of course they're not going to protect immigrants. Of course they're not going to protect people with visas. Of course they're not going to protect workers. Of course they're going to rely on enslavement. That's how the system works. And these things are fundamentally pillars of our system. Just as, trade coming in and out of the Strait of Hormuz, dominated by imperial interests, are pillars of this system. Just like, drone warfare is a pillar of this system, just like incarceration systems and policing are pillars of this system. Your engagement with your community is bought by a multi-billion-dollar international company throwing money at you in exchange for the soul of your culture, for the soul of your human interaction, for the soul of your solidarity. Oh, you're dropping straight gems today. Thank you. So for me, whether you like the World Cup, whether you don't, whether you like sports, whether you don't, if you're going to engage in it and you're going to enjoy all the great parts of it, just know that you will ruin that for yourself and others if you do not also engage with the politics behind it and with the fact that ultimately it could be so much better and it could be so much more authentic if it wasn't being carried out by these institutions. And we need to fight them before it gets so bad that we won't be able to survive.